Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tackle Talk Podcast 5-year anniversary show. We have a monster show for you all today where we get to hear from a ton, and I mean a ton, of our past guests from over the past 5 years, where they not only stop by to say hi, but each of them also gives us valuable tips for fall fishing. All that and more on what could quite possibly be the biggest episode in our 5-year history right here on Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors, Mossy Oak, and Dakota Lithium.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. As always, we are brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. We're going to talk about it today, but the past 5 years of the show would not be possible without the support of American Legacy Fishing. You know they should be your number one stop for brand new rods, brand new reels, line, baits, apparel, but also they have the internet's best selection of lightly used fishing gear too. You want a new Shimano rod, you want a new G. Loomis rod, you want a new Lew's reel, go stop and check by their used section for great deals to save money on gear that is in mint condition or very lightly used. They also have a great loyalty program that gives you 10% back on every single order when you join to be an elite member. You get free shipping with no minimums. Those two things alone make it a no-brainer to become an elite member over at ALF. But go check them out, www.americanlegacyfishing.com. And as always, use code TACKLETALK10. Tackle Talk 10 saves you 10% on almost everything on the website. Some exclusions apply, but not many. Almost everything else on that website, 10% off with code TACKLETALK10 over at www.americanlegacyfishing.com. Okay, everybody, like I said, welcome to a very special episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. It is our 5th birthday here on the show. 5 years. Part of me thinks that it has flown by. Part of me thinks it feels like just yesterday that we started this show. But either way, I'm so excited to share today's episode with you all. It's been a long time in the making, I guess 5 years technically, but this episode in particular has probably been a month or two at least in the making. And I truly think this will be one of those episodes that we'll look back on and smile for years to come. So first off, before we get to our surprise guests here on the show today, I want to say a few quick thank yous. And I know that I'm going to probably risk getting sappy here, so bear with me, but I think it needs to be said as we embark on this episode to celebrate 5 years. First off, I want you all to know I am so incredibly appreciative of every single time that you hit the play button to listen to the Tackle Talk Podcast. We live in a day and age where there are quite literally hundreds or thousands of options for you when it comes to consuming fishing content, and everyone and their brother has a YouTube channel, they have a podcast, they have an Instagram, and now you have so many choices when it comes to the type of media that you choose to consume and who you want to consume that from. And the fact that so many of you choose to listen to this show each and every week is not something that I take for granted, I promise you. Now, the weird part about podcasts is that none of the analytics or numbers or anything like that are public. So there's always this kind of mystery around podcasts and how many people are actually listening, how big or small is the show, whatever, things like that. On YouTube, you can look and you can see somebody's subscriber count, or you can see the views on their last video. Here in the podcast game, not so much, but I think that you guys have a right to know what you're a part of. So, over the past 5 years, we have had over 4.5 million downloads of the Tackle Talk Podcast. We currently average something like 1.5 to 1.7 million downloads a year. So, right there, you can see the growth that we've experienced over 5 years, because the first year that we did this show, I think we had something like 89,000 downloads total for the whole year. And now we're getting twice that many people a month that are listening to this show. And you guys know, right? At this point, I believe in transparency with you all, because you guys are just as much a part of this journey as I am. This is our show. It takes both of our time to be successful. It takes me on like the planning, producing, recording, editing side of things, but then it takes your time to actually listen to it as well. And that's why I think this is such a group effort here. And I just want you guys to know that it is extremely humbling to know that out of all of the options out there that you have to listen to on your way to work, on your way to the lake, while you're working out, while you're out fishing, doing whatever, that so many of you choose to listen to this show. So that is my first and biggest thank you to you all. Second, thank you for allowing us to be different. And what I mean by that is my goal when I started this show was to be a different kind of fishing media that I hadn't really seen a whole lot at that point. So for example, I wanted to be able to give truly unbiased opinions on fishing gear. And most people at the time would tell you that they were giving you a review, but it would either be, back end they're getting paid for it, or they're being compensated with free gear or favors or things like that. So we made the decision really early on not to accept any sponsorships from rod companies, reel companies, line companies, or bait companies in the fishing industry, which, by the way, is revenue suicide in the fishing world, because those are the guys with the money. Those are the companies that see value in advertising in the fishing world, and we decided to stay away from all of that because I believe that it would be fundamentally wrong to say, today we're going to do a completely unbiased review on a new Abu Garcia rod, and then 30 seconds later, run an Abu Garcia commercial or take a check from Abu Garcia at the end of each month. Obviously, I'm going to be inclined to speak highly of Abu Garcia if I'm taking their money, or here's the big one, if I'm even taking free gear from them, or I got that rod that I'm reviewing for free. So many people that you see on YouTube or social media are getting the free gear sent to them to review or post about. Of course, I'm going to tell you that it's nice if company A keeps feeding me free gear. Even if they don't explicitly ask me to say nice things about their gear, there's that unconscious bias, right? If I talk well about them, then they'll send me more gear. And if I talk bad about them, well, you can kiss that gravy train goodbye. And we just didn't want to play that game. So instead, we've had a ton of amazing partners over the past few years that are not specific rod, reel, line, and bait manufacturers. ALF sells all kinds of gear. Dakota Lithium is in the battery sector. Mossy Oak is apparel, and we don't review batteries or apparel on this show, so there's no conflict of interest there. And at least early on, being truthful with you guys, that felt like a risk because I wasn't sure if you guys would want to hear from someone that didn't have the credibility of being sponsored by a million companies like most people are. Because like it or not, sponsorships kind of help create this professional persona for anglers and help paint them as an authority figure, and we didn't really have that. So instead, I was just some dude talking into a mic every week saying what I liked and what I didn't like or what I genuinely thought that week, but I wanted to protect kind of the integrity of our opinions, and that was important to me. So the second big thank you goes to you all being accepting of the type of show that we wanted to build here. And the third thing I want to say here is that this community of Tackle Talk listeners that we've been able to build never ceases to amaze me. I really try and take the time to read every DM, read every Facebook message or email. I try my best to respond to each one of them. And those conversations are what make this entire thing worth it. Because I'll be honest, there are days where I struggle with this show. I struggle to get it done in time. I struggle to find time to do it, to keep organized. For 5 years, we have uploaded every single week, every single Tuesday. We have not missed a single week. If I'm out of town, I have an episode ready to go. If it's a tough week at work, too bad. I mean, I've said it before a million times on this show. From April to September during baseball season, I probably work 90 plus hours a week just at my regular job, which is twice the hours of a normal person. I leave at 7 a.m. I get back at midnight, and I do that again for weeks in a row. And that leaves very little time to produce this show for half the year. So that means there are nights where I get home at midnight or 1 a.m. after 14 hours of work. The last thing I want to do is edit or produce or record or whatever because I want to go to sleep. But that's not an option. It's 3 a.m. I'm coming in here to the studio and I'm starting to record or I'm editing or I'm working on that week's show because I know there are so many people that are counting on us to get this episode done, to make your ride to work that Tuesday morning better, to learn something that week. You look forward to it. I don't want to disappoint you. So it is going to be up every single week when you wake up on Tuesday. So those hard weeks where it just kind of takes it out of you to put another 10 to 12 hours into the show after 90 hours a week, your messages and your emails and your comments are what make this entire thing worth it. The pictures of the families out fishing using what they learned on that week's show, or the videos of the parents and the kids driving to school every Tuesday listening to the show in the car, pictures of someone smashing their personal best on a technique that we talked about that week on the show, the stories about how fishing helped save you from some dark dark path, and maybe this show played a small, minor part in that. Whatever the case may be, that's why this show exists. So I promise that we're getting toward the end of this here, but as 5 years have passed, half a decade of this silly little show that we started at my kitchen table complaining about Z-Man Shrooms hooks and how they bend out too easy, which I'd still stand by the way, it's turned into this just incredible community of people. And because we try to avoid the drama and the bias and all the nonsense that comes along with fishing nowadays, the community that you guys have created from this Tackle Talk show is full of the nicest, most genuine, die-hard, information-hungry anglers out there, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So before we get into the majority of the episode here, one more time, I just want to say thank you so much. You guys seriously are the best. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time. Today, I've got something very special up my sleeve. You guys know, over the past 5 years, we've been lucky enough to talk to some absolutely incredible guests here on the Tackle Talk podcast. They all sat down with us when they didn't have to and helped share their fishing knowledge, their tips, their history, and their opinions with us. So today, I thought it would be really fun to take a trip down memory lane and check in with a lot of those past guests that we've been fortunate enough to get to know over the past 5 years. That list includes some bona fide legends of the sport, some of the top current professionals on tour, biologists, researchers, YouTubers, and more. So we're going to check in with a lot of our pals today in this episode, but not just any check-in. In true Tackle Talk fashion, I asked each of them to send me one key tip for fall fishing. So not only did we get the pleasure of visiting with them and seeing all of these familiar faces, but we'll actually learn something along the way, as we always try to do. So first up here, it only seems right. This gentleman kicks off every single episode of the Tackle Talk podcast every week with our intro. He's one of the most recognizable anglers on the planet and a priceless ambassador for the sport of fishing. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Bill Dance.
Hey there, all you Tackle Talk listeners. I'm Bill Dance. Congratulations on your 5-year anniversary. And here's to many more. You know, it's late summer, but there's a slight hint in the air now and then that fall may be just around the corner. And with that in mind, I wanted to offer this simple fall tip, but very important tip. Now each fall on lakes with shad, see these bait fish move into the coves and pockets in large schools, migrating into the coves to spawn. The bass, of course, take mighty big advantage of this and have a feeding spree just before winter grips the landscape. I love fall fishing because of the wonderful and often predictable stable weather, but equally predictable migrating schools of shad can make autumn angling so much better. Find the shad and you can bet hungry bass are lurking nearby. Added assurance that you'll find schools in those coves fed by a creek. The change in water temperature where tributaries spill in are very attractive to shallow-bound shad. Exactly when and how long this annual phenomenon lasts is determined by how far north or south your favorite shad-infested reservoir is located on the map. But trust me, find the shad, find the bass is a very accurate claim on most reservoirs during the fall. Once again, congratulations on your 5-year anniversary. Catch one for me, and I'm really confident you can catch way more than that by simply finding and following schools of shad on your fall fishing trip. Good luck.
Wow. What a way to kick off our 5-year anniversary show, checking in with the man himself, Mr. Bill Dance. Bill has been a very important part of the Tackle Talk history for us. He was kind enough at the very beginning of our Tackle Talk journey to record our intro for us, and ever since, every single episode of the Tackle Talk podcast has began with that iconic, hello everybody, I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk. And then probably a year later, Bill was kind enough to come on and do a full episode with us in April of 2021. And that episode just showed how awesome Bill is, because we were absolute nobodies. He did not have to take the time out of his day to sit down and talk with us, but he did, because it's just the kind of guy that Bill is. And I heard stories in that episode that I'd never heard anywhere else before. It was a really great history, I think, of Bill's career and bass fishing history in general. It's an episode that I really think here at Tackle Talk we will cherish forever. But then Bill went above and beyond and basically produced a mini episode of Bill Dance Outdoors for us for today's episode, complete with music, graphics, video clips, the whole 9 yards. And this is why you should head over and watch this episode on YouTube. For once, I actually got the entire video of this whole episode together. It should be up right now, and you can actually go watch all of these guests and the videos they submitted, because the visuals are just as important as the audio today, and you don't want to miss it. So head over to YouTube, youtube.com/Tackle Talk Podcast, and watch today's episode in addition to listening, because the episode really is a treat with the visuals you guys get to see today. But thank you, Bill, so much for stopping by. We appreciate everything that Bill does for the fishing community. Now, let's move on to another gentleman that I would say is on the Mount Rushmore of bass fishing. Right there with Bill Dance, another gentleman who is synonymous with bass fishing, our buddy and past guest of the Tackle Talk podcast back in February of 2023. It's the one and only Mr. Jimmy Houston.
Hey guys and girls, Jimmy Houston here, and I'd like to just give a shout out to my buddy Andrew Hayes over at Tackle Talk Podcast. 5 years, 5-year anniversary. Congratulations, guys. I'm pretty happy and proud for you, and just tickled to death to be on your podcast at any time. I want to give you all a great fishing tip for the fall, or the spring, or the summer, or wintertime. Here's my fishing tip. Go early, stay late. That's right. That's the biggest fishing tip anyone can give anybody, because you'll never learn any more than you do on the water. Go early, stay late. You do that day after day after day, week after week after week. You're going to become not only a better fisherman, you're going to be a great fisherman. By the way, since you are fishing in the fall, you might want to pay attention to the thermocline. You see a thermocline on your fish finder. That's right. Look at your fish finder, and you'll see where the bottom is. That's a good solid line. If you see a kind of a hazy, fuzzy line up there, that's where a thermocline is. A thermocline is a 3-degree change in water temperature, 3-degree change, and it actually shows up on your fish finder. And guess what? You'll find very few fish below that thermocline. The fall of the year is a great time to really pay attention to the thermocline. You might think, since it's hot and everything, late summertime, early fall, hot, still having 100-degree days in a lot of part of the country, you might think, gotta fish deep, but those fish will not be below that thermocline. Most of the lakes here in Oklahoma, where I'm fishing right now, thermocline's around 12 or 14 feet. Most of the fish about 1 foot, 2 foot above that thermocline. Guys and girls, fish lucky, and remember, I sure do love you.
Thanks, Jimmy. Always awesome to hear from Jimmy Houston. Our episode with Jimmy is something that I'll always be appreciative of, because Jimmy, like so many other people in the world, is a man of extremely strong faith. And on that episode, we got to talk a lot about it at the end of the episode, something that doesn't really get talked about a whole lot on our show very often, not because I don't want to, just because we kind of try and stay in our lane and really just talk nitty-gritty fishing stuff, and we kind of tend to not really poke our head outside of that too much. But toward the end of that episode, with it being such a big part of Jimmy's life, and one of the reasons why we love Jimmy so much, his daily devotionals and his messages of faith and all of that, I think I will always have a soft spot for the end of that episode and all the awesome feedback we got afterwards from you guys, the Tackle Talk listeners, who really appreciated getting the chance to hear that part of the conversation, and something that we don't normally get to talk about on this show a whole lot. But it is a huge part of who Jimmy Houston is. Just as much as he is about fishing, he is about faith, and again, that's why we love him so much. But then Jimmy had some great information in there about the thermocline and targeting above that thermocline, wherever that is on your lake this time of year. Jimmy said down in Oklahoma, I think he said it was like 12 to 14 foot or so, and those fish are sitting just above that. So you're dealing with suspended fish around that 10-foot deep range or so. That's a great point from Jimmy, to actually use your electronics, if you have them, and pay attention as your lake turns over where that thermocline is. Great stuff from our buddy Jimmy. We really appreciate you checking in. Hope everything's going well with you and the family. Okay, now let's jump over to someone who is currently competing on tour, and not just actively competing, but continuing a historic run of domination, the likes of which I think we've only seen a couple times maybe in bass fishing history. You know him. He's been kind enough to stop by the show twice before, once in October of 2022 and once this past January. He's an 8-time Major League Fishing champion, along with 3 combined titles on the FLW and Bassmaster Elite Series, a past Forest Wood Cup champion, a BFL All-American champion. It's the mayor of Crush City himself, Mr. Jacob Wheeler.
What's up? Congratulations on 5 years of listening. If you've been here from the get-go or just showed up, congratulations to my friend Andrew, man. Talking tackle is something that I obviously love to do. I have a lot of tackle. I got a lot of stuff. I got a lot of stuff that I got to get cleaned up, that's for sure. But 5 years is a milestone and something to be proud of. You know, taking time and putting time and effort into content and content creation is something that's not easy. It's something that's it's hard to continue to stay on top of, and seeing you work your butt off and get on top of it and do those things is really important. So that being said, my tip for fall bass fishing is going to be about spinnerbaits. Spinnerbaits, I think no matter where you're going, spinnerbaits is sort of a lost art sometimes in the sport right now. And I think that it still has its place in time. And I think fall's one of the best times to be throwing it. That being said, I'm a big fan of fluted blades. So this is a fluted blade right here. It's an accent spinnerbait. It's like a 1/2 ounce. That fluted blade in the fall really has less vibration and more flash, which makes it look like a smaller bait fish. Rather than like a flat blade, like this guy right here, same size, he has more vibration, and he still has a lot of flash, but he has a lot more vibration, maybe a little bit less flash, and it isn't broken up as much. It's more of a substantial thump and more of like a look of a bigger profile bait fish. So no matter if your water's getting cleaner, the fish are acting a little bit weird, that's one recommendation right there. The other thing, smaller profile spinnerbaits, heavier weights. So smaller blades right here, and again, fluted. This is a little accent, a little small spinnerbait. Really be able to burn this spinnerbait around shallow cover. A lot of times those fish need to be reacting to speed. Speed's everything, and it makes a big difference. So hopefully these tips help you guys out. Get out there, go bass fishing, and looking forward to catching up, Andrew. Have a good one.
We appreciate you stopping by, Jacob. Some really cool advice there, too. Fluted blades that don't really get talked about a whole lot. Flat blades are obviously way more commonplace with regular spinnerbaits and more widely available, but talking about the differences in vibration between those two blade types, and then downsizing your spinnerbait, but maintaining that heavier weight. Compact spinnerbaits like the accent one that Jacob was holding up, or the Battle Baits minigun we talked about 2 weeks ago in our episode. Again, not compromising quality and weight, but condensing the overall profile of that bait is something Jacob is obviously a fan of in the fall, and I think a lot of people would agree. And if you don't, well, it's kind of hard to argue with someone whose trophy room is probably as big as my entire house at this point. Probably a good person to listen to. So that was Jacob. Thank you so much for stopping by, dude. We appreciate it. Now, let's go way back in Tackle Talk history to one of the very first big guests that we ever had sit down and chat with us here on the show, and I can't thank him enough. Similar to Bill, this guy took time out of his very busy schedule to chat with us when we were just getting off the ground. A guy that so many of us have grown up watching on tour, a larger-than-life personality in fishing, a gentleman who was once on the GQ magazine top 10 list of most hated athletes, a guy that's been on The Late Show with Jimmy Kimmel and really helped bridge that gap, I think, between angling and pop culture, all while racking up 8 Bassmaster wins in his career so far. Your 2003 Bassmaster Classic champion, a true one-of-a-kind. Let's check in with our buddy, Mike Iaconelli.
Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli. I want to say congrats to everyone at Tackle Talk for 5 years making magic. What a great show. I also want to give you a fall fishing tip. And here it goes. Fall fishing, especially during the fall feed, fish are eating bait fish. And I love to throw bait fish colored lures, spinner baits, topwaters, but especially flukes. But every once in a while in the fall, you get into the back of a pocket or a creek or a cove, and there's so much bait that the bass are ignoring your shad-colored lures. In that situation, I put down the white or the pearl or the shad flukes, and I go to something super bright. A pink, a yellow, a chartreuse, really have a shock color to stand out from all those millions of bait fish. Try that tip in the fall if you're fishing around a lot of bait. You're going to get some more fish to bite. Bye.
Thanks a ton, Mike. Always great to hear from Ike, and he dropped a little nugget there that we should probably pay attention to. If you're in a situation where there are so many shad and so many bait fish, there's something to be said for being like the one out of a million that looks different. So Mike likes to use chartreuse and pink. I can vouch for this. I had a day in the fall like 3 years ago where I was back up a creek arm and there were fish just busting galore, bass annihilating shad, and I probably saw, 20, 30, 40 bass just annihilating shad at the surface, coming up and breaking that surface, shad flying everywhere. You could physically see the bass breaching the water. So I went over there in my kayak and I started tossing a white chatterbait in there to try and capitalize on them. I probably made like 30 casts, didn't get a single bite, all while these fish are still just blowing up like crazy. And so then I switched to a Beehite Delight jackhammer. I'll never forget it. If you know a Beehite Delight, it's like half green pumpkin, half chartreuse. And I just switched it up because the white wasn't working, and I probably caught 3 fish in 5 or 6 casts as soon as I tied on that different color. And I really think it's probably what Ike was talking about there, giving those fish kind of like a moving target to lock in and track through those thousands of bait fish that are there and really zero in on. So I think it's a great tip from Ike, something that I would keep in mind. Sometimes standing out from the crowd is even more important than matching the hatch, depending on the sheer volume of bait that you're around. Okay, let's move from one Bassmaster Classic winner to another. This gentleman was on Tackle Talk as part of our 4-part series, Breaking the Mold, where we specifically talked about the production process of balsa crankbaits. He is your 2019 Bassmaster Classic champion. He has 5 other Bassmaster victories, including 2 Elite Series victories and 3 Opens wins. More recently, he's been a force to be reckoned with on the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour with 3 stage wins, a championship with the Heritage Cup, a heavy hitters win. Let's check in with our friend DeFoe.
Everybody, DeFoe here. Just want to say congrats to Tackle Talk Podcast on 5-year anniversary. Pretty awesome stuff, man. Congrats on that. One fall fishing tip for this time of the year. You know, I love fishing in the fall. I love taking my jet boat way up a river. That's not always the case in some places. There's just some places where that doesn't really fit in. But one of my biggest tips for this time of the year is a small crankbait. A crankbait is a great way to get a reaction bite, and a small one matches those small bait fish that we have so much out there on our bodies of water this time of the year. So a small crankbait, something like an OG Tiny 4 in a shad color, that will get you some bites during this time of the year. So again, congrats. Happy 5-year anniversary. Pretty awesome stuff.
So this tip from Ott is why this whole episode is going to be so fun, to hear everybody's different tips for fall fishing. And Ott throws out a bait and a technique that I'm guilty of sleeping on in the fall, but I probably shouldn't, and that's a finesse, smaller crankbait. So I get so caught up in blades and flash in the fall that something like those small little balsa crankbaits like the OG Tiny is a great example of something that you should keep in your box. We've talked about it over the past few weeks, downsizing in the fall and why it can be such a great move to naturally match those smaller bait fish from that year's hatch. And you can definitely make the argument that something like an OG Tiny matches those as well as anything under the sun. And to be honest, because of Ott's suggestion, I am probably going to go as soon as we're done recording this, throw 2 or 3 OGs in my box for the next trip out. It's definitely a good call. So thanks, Ott. We appreciate you, man. And you know what? This next guest that we're about to go to has also won a Bassmaster Classic. I didn't realize this pattern as we lined up the guests for this episode here, but we're going to keep the Bassmaster Classic winner train rolling here. This gentleman wears about as many hats as I think you can in the fishing world today. He's a touring pro angler on the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour. He's also the co-founder of said Major League Fishing. He's the owner of a successful rod and tackle company. Our past guest from December of 2020. Please help me welcome Boyd Duckett.
Hey there, Tackle Talk listeners. This is Boyd Duckett. And first, congratulations to Andrew and the team at Tackle Talk. 5 years for this podcast. I was on it, gosh, seems like 5 years ago. It's got to be, but awesome podcast. They've grown like crazy. Always cover some good information. So congratulations to the team for making that 5-year mark. Andrew asked me to give a couple of fall tips, things that I like to do in the fall. So To me, the fall, what I chase are the moving feeding fish. That's generally the easiest way to find fish. So normally in the fall, with the zooplankton bloom changing, a lot of times the main center of your lake or the center of your river, that bait fish starts to move to the shallow areas. So I start in the backs of the pockets, the backs of the creeks. Can't go fishing in the fall without having, this is our Duckett trap. Available in a lot of colors, but lipless bait like this, key item. I want to go out there, I can cover tons of water. I'm going to get some bites, short strikes or something to tell me where the fish is. Then once I'm moving, a small swim bait, this is a 3-inch subtle tail. It's no bigger than the 3.8 subtle tail. These baits, put them on a lead head. They mimic, as you can see the back of the package, they mimic a small shad. So this is kind of my 1-2 punch. I'm going to throw a trap. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to find some. Then I'm going to catch the heck out of them, throw in a little swim bait. For me, back to the creeks, chase the shad, throw a small swim bait. You'll have a lot of fun this fall. And thanks for listening to Tackle Talk.
Thanks, Boyd. Always great to hear from Boyd, and some great information there, too. You heard him talk about covering water with a lipless or rattle trap style bait. Burning a trap or a lipless is another great technique that I'm guilty of overlooking again, but if you really want to cover water and try and find those areas, like Boyd was talking about, using it almost as a search bait just to find active fish and then zero in on them with something like the 3-inch to 3/8-inch minnow style bait that Boyd was talking about there. So find them, then zero in and focus on them. A great strategy that takes absolutely no electronics to do correctly. Cover water as efficiently as you can, find those productive areas if you see signs of life or you get bit, and then slow down and really milk those areas. That's a technique as old as time that works year-round, but especially right now when those fish are liable to be even more concentrated in certain areas or pockets or shallow flats or things like that than normal. So good stuff, Boyd. We appreciate it. Okay, next here, let's move on from some folks that have won the Bassmaster Classic to a gentleman who has emceed many Bassmaster Classics as well as hundreds of other tournaments and TV shows. He's an underwater cinematographer. He is an unrivaled master of ceremonies, a true ambassador for fishing, and our past guest from October of 2023. You know him, you love him. It is, of course, Dave Mercer.
Hey, Dave Mercer here, host of Facts of Fishing, Bassmaster Elite Series MC, and former guest on Tackle Talk, a great podcast that is celebrating 5 years, which is truly incredible because when you look at the statistics, the average podcast lasts 7 episodes. That's right, a grand total of 7 episodes of all the podcasts that are made in all the world. That's the average length of a podcast. So for this to be 5 years, kudos to Tackle Talk. Kudos to you, Andrew. A great job. I can't wait to watch your future unfold. I know you've got a great future ahead of you, and I thank you for the great weekly content. Now, that was for you, Andrew, but for everybody else tuning in, here's my fall tip. I mean, number one, the fall is my favorite time to fish for multiple reasons. First reason is finally the Elite Series is done, and I actually get to go back to fishing and not just talking about it. And the other reason is you get a lot of big bites when it comes to the fall of the year. But one of the things that I'll always keep in mind is bait fish, what the fish are feeding on. The fish, what they're feeding on is generally bigger in the fall. Spring of the year, bait fish are smaller. They get bigger and bigger as the season goes on. In the fall of the year, they are bigger. And that is why bait companies make multiple sizes of bait. So in the spring, I might start off, I'm throwing a Nessie, for example. I'll start off with the 5s. But as the season goes on, I'll jump up to the 7s and the 9s, and big things get bit in the fall. So keep that in mind. Use a bigger bait in the fall, and maybe you'll get a bigger bite. And hey, if you're not doing that, and if you like podcasts, there's other good ones too. Just saying. Every Wednesday at 6 p.m., putting hump back in your hump day. The Mercer Podcast. By the way, happy the 5th year Tackle Talk. Indeed.
So, first off, Dave has a pretty good point there. There are plenty of other podcasts out there, one of which you should obviously check out, and I have a feeling that many of you probably already do subscribe to it, is Mercer. With Dave Mercer every Wednesday, 6 p.m., YouTube, watch it. Dave has conversations with people, especially in the Bassmaster world, that so many of us just can't have because we don't have the rapport with these guys that Dave uniquely does, and that's what makes his show so special. Dave is around these guys all the time. He knows the stories. He knows the funny, goofy stuff that happens. He knows the struggles. He sees a lot of what I think goes on behind the cameras and kind of off that we don't normally get to see on social media or things like that. And that's what makes his conversations so cool. So he's absolutely right. You should go check out his show. He is one of the best. But remember when I said that this episode was going to be so fun because you're going to hear a lot of different tips and opinions? This is a great example of that. We've heard some past tips about downsizing in the fall, and Dave says, whoa, not so fast. Big baits play in the fall too. And of course, he's right. Last fall, I caught my personal best smallmouth in the river on not a small like paddle tail swim bait or a Ned rig. I caught it on a 7-inch single jointed KGB resin Chad shad. And it not only ate it, but it tried to send that glide into the shadow realm. It tried to kill that thing right in front of my very eyes, right at the surface. It was incredible to see. So yes, big baits do play in the fall too. And just because we've talked about why downsizing, might make sense for certain situations or something, your lake is different than my lake. Dave's water is different than my water. I was talking to someone last week about like the wide array of shad sizes we have here in Dayton, Ohio. There is a lake 10 minutes from my house I can be at on the water right now where those shad are probably 8, 9, almost 10 inches long. There are giant shad in that lake that are currently being eaten by bass. And then you go another 20 minutes away, and there's another lake that has great fishing in it where the average shad size is probably 3 to 3.5 inches. And guess what? I vary my approach depending on which of those lakes I'm going to be fishing on any given day. The lake that has the big shad around here also has a lower population of bass, so the average size of the normal forage is just bigger. Meanwhile, that other lake has smaller shad in it because that is a really healthy bass population that keeps those shad in check a little better. Pay attention to your specific area, your specific ecosystem, because it can matter. Good stuff from Dave. He's absolutely right. Do not overlook big baits just because we've been talking about downsizing a lot. Good stuff from Dave. Thanks, man. We appreciate it. Our next guest popping on is no stranger to the big stage and big trophies since he has 17 of them at home. 17 Bassmaster titles, 20 additional top 3s, 80 top 10s. He is a bass fishing Hall of Famer, quite possibly the best jig fisherman to ever walk the face of the earth. It is our friend, past guest from July of 2023, the legend himself, Mr. Denny Brauer.
Hi, everyone. Denny Brauer here. And congratulations to Tackle Talk on their 5-year anniversary. That's remarkable. They do a great job. I'm here to give you a tip on fall fishing today. And, fall fishing is a great time of the year to go, but unfortunately a lot of people are off playing football. They're hunting, they're doing other things, and they're really missing some great opportunities. But one thing to keep in mind in the fall is where's the bait at? You have a major migration of shad that move into the shallows, whether it's flats or back into the creeks, and the bass are going to follow. Something to keep in mind is the bass are going to set up in the upper third of the water column so that they can ambush these shad that you see in big schools on top of the water. So if you're fishing boat docks, swim your jig just right underneath the flotation. If you're fishing lay down trees, do the same. Also keep in mind in the fall that any isolated pieces of wood on a flat can be excellent targets to fish. But always keep in mind that upper third of the water column because that's where the bait's at and that's where the bass are going to be at in the fall.
Thanks so much, Denny. Always great to hear from Denny as well. Denny tells us about swimming a swim jig or working something in that upper part of the water column, which indirectly relates back to what Jimmy told us, which is to focus above that thermocline. The pieces of this are really starting to come together, I think, if you listen to all these different tips and trying to work them together, which is why fast baits and top water are staples in the fall. Swim baits, buzz baits, spinner baits, underspins, shallow crankbaits, wake baits, spooks, all of those capitalize on what Denny calls the upper third of the water column. So great advice from Denny. Again, somebody that you should probably pay attention to when he gives you some advice. He's caught more fish than probably most of us could ever dream of. We appreciate Denny stopping by. Next, let's check in with two-time Bassmaster champion. The last time we talked to this fellow was in March of 2023. Not only a great angler, but also the owner of an awesome tackle company, Missile Baits. It's John Cruz.
Hey, John Cruz here. I want to say huge congrats for 5 years for Tackle Talk. You know, I love me some Tackle Talk. So let's talk a little tackle about fishing in the fall. In the fall, I can tell you, when I see one of those dreary light rain, maybe even heavy rain days, overcast, low light conditions, there's a bait that I dream about fishing, and it is a big topwater. A big topwater walking bait like this Spro Haint, a 120 right here is exactly what I'm going to pick up. This big bad boy, get you one with a good rattle in it like this one right here. Put it on braided line. I got 50-pound Sunline AMZ, Cashin 7-foot medium action worm and rod for that topwater. Little Dawazillion action, get you a good bait caster. But that big bait, but you got, it comes with Gamakatsus. If you need to restock with those Gamakatsus, straight braid now, we're not messing around. You can heave this thing a long ways. Where am I going to fish it? We're going to be fishing it on secondary points. We're going to go back towards the backs of the creeks and the pockets. I like to check there to see if there's bait in the area. If there is, I'm going to be fishing those secondary points. Any kind of isolated dock or isolated laydown, I'm going to throw it around that. It is going to draw out those big bass. If you have grass points, love some grass, little grassy points, but you want to probably look for bait in the area. That's a big key for that fall fishing. But man, anytime I'm in the fall and I see one of those overcast days, sign me up, buddy. I'll be out there on the water. We'll see you then.
So there you go. John had, if you could see in that video, again, why you should be watching on YouTube, he had a big walking bait rigged up on there from Spro. And he talked about targeting points and targeting pockets, which of course are hot spots in the fall. But just like Denny said, he mentioned isolated docks and isolated laydowns. Isolated cover in relatively shallow water with a big old spook just like walking right above it is money. You've got that little stump or that root ball that's sitting somewhere in 6 to 7 foot water, branches coming off of it, and then you work that big knock and spook right over there. That's the good stuff. So we appreciate you, John. Great advice from John Cruz. Next, let's keep this train rolling and visit with one of the forefathers of finesse fishing, a gentleman that helped bring to light one of the most influential and widely used tactics in the entire Midwestern United States and now the world, our friend, the Ned Kehde.
Hi, Andrew. This is Ned Kehde from Lawrence, Kansas. Thank you very much for asking us to participate in your 5th anniversary of your podcast. You've added a great dimension to the angling world throughout the United States and throughout the whole world. And you asked us to maybe provide you with a little bit of insights about how we go about catching largemouth bass and smallmouth bass in northeastern Kansas during the fall, and even through the cool water periods and cold water periods from October all the way through March. And since 2023, we've been experimenting and using pretty successfully four different rigs that Z-Man Fishing Products has created. It's part of their Microsoft Finesse package, and we're using 3 of them. One of them is called the Micro Shad Fry Z. The other one is called the Micro TRD. Another one is called the Micro Tiny Tickler Z, and the last one's called the Micro Goat. And these are soft plastic baits, which are about 1.75 inches in length. And we have fixed them to a 1/20th ounce Z-Man Micro Finesse Shroom Z jig. And we use 3 different colors: red, chartreuse, and baby blue. Now, baby blue is not manufactured by Z-Man, so we just paint either the red one or chartreuse and with baby blue colored fingernail polish. And then we have fixed those jigs on these 4 different baits. And we in the fall and in the winter and in the spring and all through the years, we really like to fish around submerged aquatic vegetation, such as coontail, Eurasian milfoil, curly pondweeds, bushy pondweeds, sago pondweeds. And in the fall and throughout the winter, all the time, we use essentially 2 or 3 retrieves, which all are straight, which are swimming retrieves. One is a straight swimming retrieve, which we just constantly retrieve these rigs across the top of the vegetation, allowing the jig and the soft plastic baits just to kind of cruise right across the top, kind of polishing the top of the vegetation. There'll be times when we use what we call a swim and pause presentation, where we're reeling along with it with our rod tip down, we're just letting the bait just polish the top, and then we'll make a stop, a pause for about a second, and then we'll pick up and start reeling again, and just reeling and pausing, and then we use what we call we call it the swim, glide, and shake, or it's all the same thing as swim, pause, and shake presentation. And these three presentations have caught us a lot of fish using all of our rigs, but they have really been effective with the Microsoft baits. And then when we're not fishing vegetation, we focus on underwater terrain that consists of rocks, gravel, and boulders. And then we primarily use 3 retrieves, but we also do use the swimming retrieves, allowing these Microsoft baits to glide over the top of the rocks and the boulders and the gravel, just kind of what we call polishing the rocks, polishing the gravel, polishing the boulders. But we often also work, probably more than we do with a swimming retrieve, we do what we call a dragging presentation, and we use a drag and pause. We allow this soft plastic micro rig to just drag upon the bottom, then we let it pause for a second or two, and then we begin dragging again.
Man, it is always a pleasure to hear from Ned because he is just full of information. You can tell just from that quick clip, Ned is insanely sharp with anything and everything that has to do with details. I mean, if you remember back to our episode that we did a long time ago, the full episode with Ned a few years back, he talked about his love for not only fishing, but documenting fishing as well. Ned is a writer at heart, and he keeps that accurate log of every single fishing outing that he goes on, and then actually emails it out to an email list that we're all on so that we can keep up with what he's doing, what tactics he's using, what was working, what wasn't working. That documented data is so cool to see from Ned. I love it every single time my email beeps and I get one of Ned's emails and I get to read about his last outing. Now, Ned is obviously the namesake of the Ned rig, but he'll be the first to tell you that he was just one of a handful of very influential anglers from that kind of Kansas, Midwestern area that really put Midwest finesse style fishing on the map and brought it to the attention of the masses. So I, like a lot of other people I know around here, owe a lot of our fish catches to Ned and those innovative finesse anglers from around the plains that really helped develop these styles of fishing that we enjoy today here in places like Ohio. But from this clip from Ned, he mentions specific retrieves. He mentions a very specific 1/20th ounce jig head. He has those 4 Z-Man baits that he's using a lot that are about as tiny as Z-Man goes, the micro shad fries, the micro TRD, the micro goat, and then the micro ticklers. So those are all relatively newer plastics, I think, from Z-Man that are even smaller than the original already finesse versions of those plastics. So Ned is also leaning on smaller profile and swimming or swim and pausing those plastics and then doing what he called polishing rocks by keeping it just above those rocks and keeping it a little bit suspended. Again, great stuff from Ned Kehde. Mr. Kehde, we thank you so much. We appreciate you as always. Okay, next here, let's slide over to a guy that many of you know and probably watch on TV or Bass Live or FS1 on the weekends and heard here on Tackle Talk back in November of 2021. It is our buddy, Bassmaster commentator, Mr. Ronnie Moore.
Andrew, congratulations, man. The Tackle Talk podcast, absolutely phenomenal. I appreciate you having me on as a guest a long time ago, and now you've been doing it for 5 years, so congrats. Ronnie Moore here. If you don't know, Now you know. Was asked to talk about fall fishing and what I like to do, or maybe what I like to see get done, since I'm on this side of the fishing industry, on the broadcast side. And first off, I gotta say, don't listen to anything Andrew has to say when it comes to certain topwaters, because he likes to use snaps religiously, and I'm not against snaps, but just be cautious. Snaps aren't always the best thing, but I had to rag on Andrew a little bit. He'll put a snap on a spinnerbait, a buzzbait. He'll put a snap on anything. I don't know how he does it, but that's beside the point. When I think about fall fishing, and I'm going to take maybe myself out of it a little bit at the beginning. When I think about fall fishing, at least what we see on the Bassmaster Opens, the college bracket, the end of the elite season, on those years where we've been down south at the end, there are a couple techniques I like to see get done and the strategy involved, and that would be topwater for sure. Topwater is one of my favorite things to watch get fished, but also the do or die aspect of it in the fall. A lot of guys locking a buzzbait in their hand, whether it's with a skirt or whether it's with a toad or some kind of soft plastic. Locking a buzzbait in your hand for 5 bites is absolutely risky and daring, but so rewarding as well. And the way they bite it, or whopper plopper, things like that. Those are two that I enjoy doing, but enjoy watching, because you know how much water you have to cover. And in the fall, it's okay to not be on them, but to be in a general region and know what's going on and trust if I make enough casts, present it the right way, it can get right in one creek and make my whole day. And the next day, it's a whole different creek. So I love topwater fishing, but one thing, not bait-wise, but structure-wise, that I like to fish, but also are so important this time of the year in the fall, as fish are going from late summer. Maybe there's fish already up on the bank during the summer, looking for that shade, any kind of cover they have, or those fish that are deeper in late summer as they make their move towards the bank, follow those bait fish into the creeks. Docks are absolutely a phenomenal piece of structure, and so there's a lot of places to fish on docks. Not every dock is the same. It's just like, people are talking about that stretch of grass versus this stretch. Docks, it's not every dock is the same. You get on a stretch, you can really dial it in. And so I like dock fishing because you can do 6, 7, 8 different rods on your deck and use them to catch a keeper to contribute to your limit and put it down and pick up another one. And so docks are a good place for that. In between the docks, paralleling the banks with a topwater, maybe square billing some of the riprap on those flat banks. Then when you get up to the dock, you have those walkways, great places to sling a chatterbait, topwater, swim bait, spinnerbait, things like that. And then you start to get to your skippable spots, skipping up under the walkway where it meets the bank and where it meets the dock. Great places to go. And then you have all those places on a floating dock or a poled dock. You've got all those little slots you can slide a jig in, wacky rig, things like that. You get into the boat lift part of it. There's a certain pattern. You can see bluegill maybe underneath the boat docks. Bait fish, you'll see a big one, maybe a big bass, just keeping his domain under that dock and hanging around there. So a lot of places to fish. Charlie Hartley once said it in the 2008 Classic, and I've kind of thought about and stuck by this the rest of my life. 2008, he said, don't worry about landing the fish, worry about getting the bite. So pitching in, skipping into some of the most gnarly docks often are scary, but often you won't get that bite unless you do it. So worry about getting the bite and then worry about getting the fish out later. I'd rather have gotten the bite and lost the fish than never have gotten the bite before. So anyways, fall fishing can be fun. All jokes aside, listen to Andrew and listen to the Tackle Talk podcast. 5 years, congrats, many more, maybe, hopefully.
First off, we have to address it. Snapping ain't a crime, right? You said that you're not against snaps, but you sound a little anti-snap there, Ronnie. You got to be careful there. That's hilarious, though. But he also had a really cool way of coming at this question, because as a commentator, you have a front row seat to the best bass fishing in the world, and it was interesting to hear what he likes to see people do in the fall. And topwater obviously is the right answer to anybody that loves watching fishing. I have to agree. Watching topwater, whether it's your rod or someone else's rod, is exhilarating regardless. But I liked his breakdown breakdown there, right? Like boat docks and why those are so much fun to fish makes a whole lot of sense to me. I never really thought about it, but yeah, as you're watching a tournament on TV, when you're fishing docks, that's not a technique where you just have one rod in your hand that you keep beating over and over again. Every dock is different. So you go from one dock to the next one to the next one, and you're switching from chatterbaits to swim baits to wacky rigs to skipping jigs, flukes. I mean, you're reaching for all different kinds of stuff depending on what you're seeing and how that dock sets up differently than the last dock and the dock coming up. So follow-up baits, there's a lot of really cool things you get to see just because of the way that you have to fish docks, and it makes for good TV. So good stuff there from Ronnie, and he better watch the mail. It'd be a real shame if like 1,000 snaps just showed up to his mailbox next week. Okay, let's move on to someone that I would probably call Tackle Talk royalty. I guess that's probably a way to put it at this point. He's been on this show, I think, more than anybody else that has ever been a guest on Tackle Talk. I believe we are at 5 official full-length episodes. He is a wealth of knowledge on anything and everything bait fish, bluegill, pond management, or biology in general. It's a guy that has stuck with us from darn near the beginning of this show, has become a great friend of ours. You know him, you love him. It's the aquatic biologist, Mr. Shan O'Gorman.
Hello, everyone. My name's Shan O'Gorman. Some of you might know me by my call sign on social media, aquatic biologist. And Andrew asked me to do a short video celebrating his 5-year anniversary. Wow, 5 years. It's gone by quick. I think I'm the only guest that has made an appearance every year, all 5 years. And I'm super proud of that. And certainly would like to thank everyone for their positive engagement and in listening to me drag on about fisheries management. It can be boring sometimes, but you know, we try to make it interesting for you guys, and it's just been an honor and a pleasure to have participated with Tackle Talk so many times. But with that in mind, and the fall coming up, let's talk a little bit about fish safety and safe fish handling. I see a lot of poor fish handling practices on social media and on television, so let's touch on that a little bit. One idea when bass fishing to keep in mind is jaw safety, especially with your larger bass. The jaw is a spot that can be broken or sprained, and then when you release the fish back, of course, it won't be able to eat properly with a sprained or broken jaw, and it'll starve to death. And in trophy bass management, you know, we want to try to avoid that. So guys get used to handling smaller fish and kind of whipping them around by the jaw, and that's okay. But as the fish get bigger, you really need to pay attention to suspending that fish by its jaw. Be very careful with it, and always use your second hand. Really is probably the best tip that I can give you. Wet your hands when you're handling the fish, and support the belly. Like really get up in there on the belly of the fish and support it with your second hand, especially on that horizontal hold. Support the internal organs. They'll sag when they're out of the water, and we don't want that. That can cause internal organ damage. So that second hand on the grip and grin photo opportunities is really important. And I also mentioned wetting your hands. That's also really important because that protects the fish's slime coat. And the slime coat has like this antimicrobial type properties that keep bacterial infections out. And, you know, pond water, lake, river water is not very clean. So that's super important, especially as we come up here into the fall, because that slime coat won't regenerate itself in the cooler temperatures. It only regenerates very well in the warmer temperatures. So if you lay a fish on a dry surface or touch it with a dry hand and peel that slime coat off, it will subject that fish to bacterial infections all winter. We want to try to avoid that. Thanks again for everything, you guys, and tight lines.
And I love this out of Shan, right? Just like Ronnie took this question and really tailored it to what fits him best, Shan did the same thing here. You just heard Shan talk about safe fish handling for fall. So belly support is important when you're holding those fish horizontal, which lately I have been liking to hold my fish horizontal for pictures. There's just something about them. I think it just looks a little better, but you have to support that belly, especially in the fall, because they're getting even fatter than normal. There's more weight on that jaw if you don't hold them right. More weight means more opportunity for mishandling and for injuries just because of their sheer weight difference than normal alone when they're held wrong. So good stuff there. Respect the slime coat. Like he said, hold that fish completely vertical or supported by its belly if you're holding it horizontal, and then get that fish back in the water as quickly and safely as possible. That is the name of the game when we're trying to protect our resources in these situations. Thanks, Shan. We appreciate you. Let's keep the past biologists and research guests coming with a gentleman that was kind enough to come on Tackle Talk in January of 2023 to talk about a very cool smallmouth tracking study that he conducted up on Lake Erie. It is Ohio Department of Natural Resources researcher Zach Slagle.
Hi, Tackle Talk listeners. This is Zach Slagle, fisheries biologist with the Ohio Division of Wildlife, calling in to say congrats to Tackle Talk on 5 years of excellent podcasting. My fall fishing tip for you is to not be afraid about throwing bigger baits. We run our smallmouth assessments in September and October on Lake Erie, and we see that smallmouth are mostly eating either gizzard shad or lots of gobies. But we see some pretty big fish. You know, we've had a nice long growing season. Those gizzard shad are getting up to 6 or 7 inches long, gobies up to 5 or 6 inches. We see those in the smallmouth diets. So don't be afraid of throwing something bigger if you're trying to catch a bigger fish. Tight lines.
There you go. That right there is why I love biology and I love the science side of fishing, because I can't argue with what you actually find in a fish's stomach. You can ask a million people, a million anglers what they think. At the end of the day, hard data is key. And if you're going to be examining the stomach contents of the exact fish that we're out there fishing for and trying to catch, those findings don't lie. Zach said they're finding 6 to 7 inch gizzard shad and like 5 inch plus gobies in smallmouth stomachs. So that leads to some credibility to mixing in some of those 7 inch big glide baits or swim baits in with your finesse techniques, because Zach's not saying they don't eat smaller fish, but he's saying that when they open up those stomachs, there definitely are bigger bait fish in there too. So that's good to know. Can a smallmouth actually eat and swallow a 7 to 8 inch shad? The science says yes, and we should take note of that when we're out fishing. Okay, you know what? It's been a lot of dudes in here up until now. Let's fix that. Let's go to someone who is one of my favorite folks in the fishing industry. She is a kayak hammer. She uses her platform for good. She's inspiring girls to get into the sport for the right reason. She's a fellow muskie nut. She's a 2-time Tackle Talk guest. Let's check in with the great Christine Fisher.
What is up, everybody? My name is Christine Fisher. First off, I've got to extend a huge congratulations to Tackle Talk Podcast, Andrew. I've always said this. I've done a lot of podcasts over the years, and that was always one of my favorite. The questions were original, which is super refreshing. It was intelligent, entertaining, relevant, all the things that you want in a good podcast. So y'all are doing good things. Please keep up the work. I wanted to give one tip for fall fishing, and my tip is take all the bass gear and all the rods and reels and put them up. Put them away. Get yourself an 8.6 heavy and a 9-foot X heavy. Pick up some big glide baits, some pounders, some big Medusas, Poseidons, and do some muskie fishing. That's right. That is my tip for fall fishing. Y'all have a good one out there. Stay safe and enjoy the fall.
So I have to say, I kind of agree with Christine here a little bit. I looked back, and the heavy majority of the muskie that we've caught around here have been in September and October. Those are the hot months around here for muskie fishing. Now, the only problem is those are also hot months for bass fishing. Those are hot months for the start of deer season. So it's the time of year where you have such a hard time deciding what to do with your day here in the Midwest. But on the right day, with the right weather and moon phases and all that weird stuff that affects muskie, some days in September and October can just be magical. So I hear you, Christine. We've definitely been given the Medusas and the double tens and the swimming dogs a workout lately. I know you have too. I've seen the pictures. And if you live in a productive muskie area, get out and fish for muskie. It's a great time to do it. Okay, let's keep moving on here. Let's get to a past Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour and Tackle Warehouse Invitational champion, your 2023 Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour Angler of the Year. It's Matt Becker.
What's up, guys? It's Matt Becker here. I was on the Tackle Talk podcast before, so here I am giving you my thoughts. Congrats on 5 years, man. That's awesome.
Appreciate what you do, Andrew. I mean, it's a really good podcast, in-depth, always talking about good tackle. You know, it's not always, you know, what fits the sponsor agenda or anything. It's just what works, and that's what I really appreciate about what you do. But I wanted to bring you guys my number one tip for fall bass fishing. Number one tip. If I had to give you one piece of advice for fishing in the fall, it's going to be to downsize your lures. You know, a lot of times in the fall, the bass get keyed in on that year's hatch of shad. You know, they're real small. They're an inch long. So downsizing your baits is going to help you catch those fish. So a couple examples of that. You know, I like to downsize to a 1/4 ounce rattle trap. Real small profile. I mean, this really imitates those real small yearling hatch shad, whether they're threadfin, alewives, whatever it may be. You know, downsizing your bait's going to imitate that. So, you know, I like to do it with a rattle trap and then a little 1.0 square bill. So those are two ways you can downsize your baits. And you can apply this across any bait you want to throw, but downsizing your bait in the fall is going to help you get a few more bites and catch you a few more fish. So appreciate you as always, and anytime you need a guest on the show, I'm available. So I guess my phone's been broke. I haven't heard from you in a little while. So anytime you need someone on the show, you let me know, and we'll get on there and we'll talk some bass fishing, talk some tackle. So appreciate everything you've done. Crazy that you've been at it for 5 years, but that's really awesome, and congrats. And hopefully this is a pretty cool show for everyone watching.
Thanks, Matt. Good stuff there, too, right? We talked about downsizing, lipless and rattle traps, but one of the things that he points out that I want to really hammer on here is a 1.0 square bill. I used to be a diehard 1.0 square bill guy. Like 90% of the time when I'd go fish in a square bill, it was a downsized 1.0. And then I slowly started to go up, and now I really favor more of like a 1.5. And that's been my habit lately, is picking up the 1.5 over the 1. But really, really, really early in spring and then smack dab in the middle of fall fishing, I'll pick that 1.0 right back up and chuck it for hours. And the 1.0 I think that Matt had in his hand there looked like a Bill Lewis ATV, probably like a 1.0, whether it's that, whether it's a Strike King KVD 1.0, a Lucky Craft 1.0, they're all in that like 2 to 4 foot diver range, shallow water, fish chasing that 2 to 3 inch bait. The subtlety of a 1.0 versus a 1.5, it all can definitely pay off. Good suggestions there from Matt Becker. And from one Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour champion to another, let's jump over to a guy who just had a heck of a full first season on the BPT with a win, a 4th place AOI, I believe, with a lot more ahead. Let's check in with our buddy, Drew Gill.
Hey guys, Drew Gill here. Hope everybody's doing well, and congratulations on 5 years, Andrew. You know, that's a super awesome achievement. Big thing for me in the fall. Man, fall fishing is a tricky time for sure. It's very transient. You know, these fish are changing a lot. It's one of those transition times of the year. So big thing for me, stay around the forage. Everybody tells you stay around the bait in the fall, which is a huge, tip, but they don't really tell you how to go about doing that. Staying around the bait oftentimes requires, finding those creeks, finding those influxes of water is really important in the fall. And staying around, in the fall, a lot of times you get a turnover in a lot of your fisheries. Staying around that change in watercolor, wherever that change of watercolor is, from that, tannic, off-colored, flipped water to that more clean, general color of that lake is really important. Stay around those break lines of those watercolor changes, and generally you'll find the bait. But man, if you can stay around fresh water, that is always my focus in the fall.
So right there, Drew mentioned staying around watercolor changes, and that's a good one that we haven't heard yet, but baitfish can certainly relate to that break line, and it actually goes like for all times of year too. So around here, it's not quite what Drew's talking about, but it's close. We get mud lines in the river when we get a really heavy rain. The main river is just chocolate milk, and then you'll have some sort of like discharge or, creek coming in or something that's dumping in clean water, and it makes that just crystal clear mud line break where you have muddy water and clear water, and they meet in this perfect line. And I will actually sit there in a kayak and I will cast into the dirty water and bring that bait across that line into the clear water, and those fish are often just waiting there to ambush it when it crosses that line. I had one of the best fishing days I've ever had on the river doing that after a big rain. Those smallmouth were just sitting like 5 to 10 foot off that mud line, and I probably pulled 7-8 fish off that same cast over and over and over again. So that's obviously on a a much smaller scale than what Drew is talking about here probably, but I've seen it happen firsthand. Looking for that fresh, clean water, or the source of that fresh, clean water and where it's coming from can pay dividends. Okay, next here, fishing is obviously all about patterns. Well, we have a pattern going right now, I think, of Major League Fishing champions. It seems to be working. Let's roll with it. This next guest that we have here is a more recent guest in the Tackle Talk world, making his Tackle Talk appearance back in April of this year. It is Major League Fishing stage winner, Major League Fishing heavy hitters winner, and second generation professional angler, Mr. Alton Jones Jr.
Hey guys, Alton Jones Jr. here. I want to say huge congrats to the Tackle Talk podcast on 5 years. And to celebrate 5 years, I've got a little tip for you guys. It can be a fall tip, but really just any time of year. And you know, what's kind of overtaking the industry and is a bit of a fad right now are the fuzzy baits. You know, you've got the OSP, and then this is the G-Crack Q-Bomb. You've got several other Japanese variances of it. And it's kind of a silly looking but intimidating bait to throw. And as I've begun to put it more in my arsenal, I've learned how to use it and how not to use it. Now, first off, this bait is very situational. It's not the first bait I throw whenever I get to a lake, but when I get around fish that just won't bite, this is what I break out, thinking outside the box. A lot of times, especially if you're in a part of the country where it's late summer, fish are tough to catch, fishing around structure. They've been very conditioned if they're still offshore. Something like the G-Crack Q-Bomb or a fuzzy bait of some kind is going to generate bites. And my number one tip is fish it up off the bottom. You look at this bait and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to drag this along the bottom. All of my bites come up off the bottom. Now, that doesn't mean that it has to be way suspended in the water column. Sometimes it just means using an extra long drop shot leader, but always trying to keep that bait moving, shake it violently, and keep it off the bottom. That's the tip.
Thanks, Alton. Another first for the episode, right? JDM style, like fuzzy baits or fuzzy dice that you're putting on a drop shot. Specifically for Alton, it was that G-Crack Q-Bomb, which is one of the signature baits of Alton's, but leaning into that sort of give them something different mindset, right? Something they haven't seen a whole lot and thinking outside the box. But another key feature that he was talking about here is keeping that bait suspended on a drop shot or otherwise, like we've talked about with a couple of the other guests. In the fall, techniques that stay above the fish work really well. They're not always just glued to the bottom. Fish are eating, they're looking up, they're active, and if there's one time of year that you can chill on those bottom contact baits a little bit, for me, it's fall. And that was one of Alton's points here, right? Was keeping it off the bottom to get better results. You're not dragging it, you're keeping it up, and you're violently shaking it. Okay, next up here is a gentleman that is always a treat because he always comes prepared with facts and knowledge. When he speaks, you will likely learn, and that's what we love about him. He was a past guest on Tackle Talk back February 27th of 2024, where he gave us his top 10 moments in bass fishing history. He's forgotten more bass fishing information than many of us will ever know. He is a great curator and historian of the sport. It is the one and only Mr. Ken Duke.
Hey everybody, Ken Duke here from Bass After Dark and the Big Bass Podcast. Just want to wish Andrew Hayes and Tackle Talk a very happy anniversary. 5 years in the podcasting and YouTube world. That's really impressive. I got nowhere near that amount of time on those platforms yet, but I'm coming after you, Andrew Hayes, trying to get there, following your example, which is a very high standard to meet. I don't have a conventional fall fishing tip. I mean, I'm not going to tell you to throw spinnerbaits and square bills up the creeks where the shad are moving or stuff like that. Instead, I'm going to give you a little bit of history and background on when some big fish are caught. As a matter of fact, no less than 7 state record largemouth bass came during the fall in September, October, November. And they came from all over the country, really, from as far south as Alabama, as far west as Colorado and Idaho, as far north as Minnesota and Michigan. So they're out there. They can be taken in the fall. The situation is even better for smallmouth bass. 10 different states gave up their state records in the fall, including every state that begins with the letter I. It's Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, and Idaho. So there you go. If you're looking for a big bass, especially in that central part of the country, a big smallmouth, the fall is a great time to get it. Get out there, chase them, catch a big one. Tell Andrew all about the gear you used and how you did it, and tell me the full story behind that. We'll get you on Big Bass Podcast, Bass After Dark. Andrew, again, thank you for setting such a wonderful example for guys like me in the podcasting world and for providing such great education, entertainment, and engagement for all your listeners and viewers.
So right there, Ken Duke doing Ken Duke things. There is great information right there from Ken. I would have assumed there were a fair number of state records that were broken in the fall. Spring obviously going to be ahead of fall in a lot of states, but those numbers are really interesting. 7 largemouth state records are held by fish caught in the fall. 10 smallmouth state records, and I guess if you live in a state that begins with the letter I, you should probably stop what you're doing right now and go out and try and catch a smallmouth. That was great, Ken. We appreciate it a ton. Next up, we have another guest from this past year, a rookie on the Bassmaster Elite Series that's quickly becoming a fan favorite, a great guy, a New York stick. He's the fruit bat, the barefoot wonder, the Sour Patch Kid. It is, of course, Kyle Patrick.
What is going on, everyone? Kyle Patrick, and I just wanted to say to the Tackle Talk podcast, happy 5-year anniversary. That's cool thing to be able to provide us all, all the anglers with a ton of really valuable information, and just learning about fishing. So cool. So 5 years is epic. Out here on the Mississippi River, it's the fall, it's September. So one of my fall fishing tips is gonna be about covering water, moving, and it's really key to move around, cover water, but also when you get in an area that has a lot of fish, say some grass that's still around or any sort of structure, make sure that you're looking around that structure. Like if you find a brush pile or you find a grass clump or you find a grass stretch, and there's fish in it, that's great. Make sure that you expand outwards around that area, because a lot of times there'll be fish in that general area that aren't necessarily on that structure. And we all know fall fishing can be tough, so every bite matters. See you guys.
So there, from Kyle, I like that tip too, expanding your target area around the obvious cover. So in the fall, fish are starting to roam more. Obviously, they're getting a little bit more adventurous. They leave home base a little bit more. And in the summer, those fish could be tucked pretty close to that cover all day long. In the fall, not so much, which means don't just roll up on that cover either, right? Work your way up to it slowly. Remember back to our episode about fishing wood. You can't unspook fish. So if those fish are 20 to 30 foot off that brush pile, don't pull up 20 foot off the brush pile and start casting. Stay away and slowly work your way up to that brush pile after you've eliminated all of that water that's surrounding it. Okay, next up here, we have 2023 Bassmaster Classic champion, past Tackle Talk alumni, the Canadian snow leopard, Jeff Gustafson.
Hey guys, Gussie here. Just wanted to congratulate you on 5 years. Keep up the good work, keep kicking out the good content, and I challenge you to show us what the Japanese anglers are really using.
So always great checking in with Gussie. He's probably right at this point. We probably should try and figure out what the Japanese anglers are really using and not just what they decide to show us like 5 years later and sell to us. We'd probably be getting somewhere if we had some spies over there could let us know really what they're over there using. Okay, really quick, let's also check in with November 2022 Tackle Talk guest, past Bass Nation champion, professional saxophone player, actor, model, maybe the most interesting man in fishing. It's Matty Wong.
Hey there, bass fishing fans. I just wanted to pop on real quick, say congratulations to Andrew and the Tackle Talk for 5 years doing your thing. Keep killing it, bro. Have a great day. Aloha.
So there's Maddie. Thanks, Maddie. We appreciate it. Next up, let's pop in with past guests and now co-owners of Dark Horse Tackle, who was one of the very first partners on the Tackle Talk podcast. Two great dudes that believed in the show very early on, have become great friends of ours. It's Zach and Josh from Dark Horse Tackle.
What's going on, everybody? It's Josh.
And Zach from Dark Horse Tackle.
As one of the earlier sponsors
and good friends of the Tackle Talk podcast and Andrew Hayes,
also known as Dark Horse Tackle's most handsome boy,
we want to congratulate you on 5 years of hard work and success.
You have a professional sound and you constantly surround yourself by some of the best company, so it's no doubt in our minds that you've made it 5 years.
Now, for our fall fishing tip, we highly suggest that you cover a ton of water.
And do not slow down. Those fish could be anywhere in the water column. The water is only cooling down. And they are getting real frisky and feeding up for that wintertime slowdown.
All right, Andrew. Here's to the next 5 years and hopefully many more after that of success for you, buddy.
Woo! Thanks, boys. Appreciate it. Covering water, name of the game, obviously. A lot of days in the fall, no question about it. Whether that means you get to do it all day long and those fish are truly active and feeding, or you're just covering water to try and find those spots that show promise and then concentrate on those further. Good stuff there. We appreciate it, boys. Next, let's jump to a dude who is truly one of the OGs of fishing YouTube. And he's also one of the OGs of the Tackle Talk podcast. I'd have to look, but I'm guessing he was either our very first guest or one of our very first guests, definitely one of the very early on folks on this show. I should probably apologize to him for how rough around the edges we probably were back then. I promise we've gotten a little better since then, but this is a guy that I've been watching on YouTube since I figured out what YouTube was. It's the amazing Mikey Balls.
What up, my Tackle Talk homies? Congratulations on the 5-year anniversary. I'm actually congratulating myself and on a little bit of a vacation here in Florida. Got the pool next to me. Bog's over there chewing on the bone. But you guys asked me for one tip for fall. So it's not quite fall down here in Florida yet. It's still 973 degrees. Basically, I'm in hell. But the fishing isn't that bad. So what I like to do this time of year, and it applies more to kind of like being up north, I really like to target lakes, especially moving into later and later fall, that have grass. You know, I stay away from the highlands impoundments. I stay away from, you know, just barren kind of river chains and that. I really look for the grass in fall because I'm a huge fan of punching and also frogging and flipping, basically, going for that heavy cover option. And I just find fish get really weird in fall. You know, they're chasing like little bait. They're schooling, but they can be really hard to catch, and they move around a lot. They're almost more forage focused than cover focused. And the one thing that I've found is to like the most consistent fishing, especially for bigger fish, that I can find, especially as we get into that mid to late fall period, really relates to the grass, and it makes them set up the way that I want to catch them. And oftentimes kind of guys lose sight of that late fall grass bite. They start thinking about winter. They start thinking about suspended fish. They start thinking about fish out deep. And I'm still kind of finding those last patches of green grass or mats that are hidden away or super duper isolated, which also leads to them holding some bigger fish. So that's my little fall tip. It's a little more of a late fall tip, but you guys can stick it out and put it up whatever you want. But congrats on the 5 years, man. I hope it continues for another 5 and another 5 after that. Hope you guys are getting out for some fishing. We will talk to you later.
That was great. That's another really smart answer to this sort of open-ended question. He mentioned that a lot of guys are out there doing what we've already talked about. Yeah, the fish are chasing bait. Yeah, they're moving a lot. Yeah, they're suspended. But guess what? There's still fish in the grass that are getting overlooked, and you kind of get them all to yourself, and you can still catch them on the most fun techniques in the world, frogging and flipping. So that's cool. Sort of zigging while everybody else zags. I like that. Saying, yeah, those other patterns, sure, they work in the fall, but here's what I like to do, right? And it's something that the majority of people are overlooking, what Mikey calls that late fall grass bite. I like that. Okay, looking at the 3 names, I think, probably, that are coming up next on this list, it's interesting. These 3 guys have not only been on the Tackle Talk podcast over the years, but they've really become like true kind of everyday friends of mine over this wild Tackle Talk journey. So first up, we have the host of another great show, the Serious Angler podcast. Help me welcome Bailey Eichbrett.
What's up, guys? Bailey Eichbrett here from the Serious Angler podcast, and I've been hearing rumor that it might be the 5-year anniversary of the Tackle Talk podcast, which, if that means anything, that means that it's been 5 years now that I've been trying to be half as good as the Tackle Talk podcast. Andrew, dude, congrats on 5 years, man. You do one hell of a job over there. I've told you countless times that, I'm not jealous. I'm more like, damn, wish I did that. There's so many different things you do, and the creativity and the originality you bring to the show that I definitely strive to look to as for inspiration, motivation. And I know you and I agree on this all the time. It's not competition, it's collaboration. And you are one hell of a dude, and I gotta say, I'm glad to call you a friend. I might make fun of you for using snaps. I'll never get over that. I will always make fun of you for using snaps. But, dude, you do a hell of a job. Tackle Talk podcast. You're one of the most respected people, in my opinion, in this industry. And you're the future moving forward, man. You speak to the people. And you don't speak with any bias. You speak with your own opinion. and you back that opinion up. So, man, dude, I appreciate you. I appreciate the time we got to fish together up here, and looking forward to future fishing trips and future Tackle Talk episodes. Appreciate you, brother. Keep on keeping on.
Okay, two things there. One, sound the alarm. We have another snap hater. I will forever be unapologetically pro snap, but he is right. I went up there to fish with him in New York earlier this year, and I saw him shake his head at me probably a dozen times as I was, snapping on new lures and stuff. So yeah, I know he had to hide his disappointment the best he could when he saw that, oh, this guy really does use snaps on like almost everything. But two, Bailey was actually being so nice in that clip that he forgot to give us his fall fishing tip. But if I know Bailey, which I do very well at this point, even if he didn't say it out loud, he would probably say the best fall fishing tip that he could give me would be to get in my truck and drive straight out of Ohio. And I don't think he would probably be wrong on that. Okay, let's jump to another past guest of the show, a buddy of ours. He is an encyclopedia of baits. I don't know how he retains all of this information on new and especially older and vintage baits, but also the colors, the values, things like that. There is a reason they call him the Bait Man. It is, of course, Kevin Baxter.
What's up, guys? Bait Man here, and I just want to congratulate Andrew for 5 years of the Tackle Talk podcast, and it has been awesome listening to it. In my opinion, is the best fishing podcast out there. Great host, great content, and tons of very loyal viewers. So congrats, Andrew. Now, let me give you a little tip for fall fishing. I know this sounds really crazy, but bass are doing lots of different things. They're eating. They're hungry. Take a lot of different baits. Spice it up. Bring your big top waters, your lipless, your spinner baits. Bring some jerk baits. Reaction baits rule in the fall. Take advantage of those overcast days. Burn a spinner bait. Throw a spook. Twitch it as fast as you can. Burn a buzz bait. That's when you catch those big fish, and you'll catch numbers using reaction baits, overcast, crappy days. And remember, the wind is your friend.
So Kevin's right on the money there too, right? Burn a spinnerbait, walk a spook fast, be aggressive. He mentioned the cloudy, crappy days with wind, and that's the darn truth. I'm looking in the forecast for like the worst day in the 10-day forecast. I want low pressure, I want ripping winds, and I'm out there fishing moving baits. Those are the days in the fall where it can just turn into absolute madness. So yeah, I am right there with you, Kevin. Okay, and next up here, along the same lines, a guy who came on probably about 3 or 4 years ago on the Tackle Talk podcast to talk square bills. We've been friends ever since. He has a great YouTube channel, does a great live show, all around good dude. It is Alex Rudd.
What's up, guys? It's Alex from Alex Rudd Fishing, and I want to first of all start out with congratulations. 5 years of the Tackle Talk podcast is absolutely awesome. It's crazy because the Tackle Talk podcast is one of my favorite fishing podcasts, and it's probably one of the best fishing podcasts on the internet. It's so much better than the Serious Anglers podcast, but almost as good as the Alex Rudd Fishing podcast. And so congratulations. Totally, obviously that was a joke, haha, but for real, congratulations. 5 years is absolutely crazy. It shows the dedication that Andrew has to bringing you some of the best fishing content on the internet and bringing it in the podcast form, and he does an absolute phenomenal job of it. And so congratulations, sir. Congratulations to just what an awesome career up to this point. I can't wait to see what the next 5 years brings as well. Now, my one tip for fall fishing is really, really simple. Just go fishing. So many people want to get on the internet and they want to tell you all of these different tips, tricks, what baits you should throw, what you shouldn't throw, when you should go, when you shouldn't go. But I'll tell you, if there's one certainty about fall fishing, fish are eating. And the best thing that you can do is get out there and put something in front of their face and go figure out the bite. Now, I know that's one of those tips you're like, well, yeah, duh, Alex, but I think we get way too caught up in the minutiae sometimes of knowing what bait, when to throw it, where to throw it, all those kinds of things. And fall, just like spring, is a time when fish are eating. They're willing to eat a bunch of different things. So go out there, go fishing, throw what you like to throw, do what you like to do, because during the fall, they're probably going to bite that stuff. And that's my number one tip for fall fishing, is just go fishing. And like I said, one more time, congratulations, Tackle Talk podcast. 5 years is absolutely awesome, and I am glad to have been able to be a part of it in my little way that I have, and just see you grow and see what you've been able to do. And so congratulations. We'll see you guys later, and yeah,
Bye.
And that right there is a great answer for this point in the show. You've heard a ton of different answers, from micro baits to large baits to rocks to grass to suspended to shallow, crankbaits to fuzzy balls, but it all comes back around to just get outside and make the darn casts. The number one requirement for catching big fish in the fall is to physically go out off your couch and fish. Alex is 100% right on that one. Okay, folks, finally, we have come to our last two guests, and I thought it was only fitting to end the show with the folks that have believed in this show for the majority of this show's existence. They are the reason why this show continues to exist. We wouldn't be able to physically produce the show or pay for all of the expenses that this show incurs without them, like hosting fees, website fees, software fees, equipment, everything you need to actually run a podcast. And they're two dudes that I would run through a brick wall for, and so many of you have got to experience their level of care and commitment as a customer, but I can't overstate how important they are to this show as we mark our 5-year anniversary. There would be no 5 years without American Legacy Fishing. So, very fitting to end the show here today. Our last two guests are going to be past guests of the show, Adam Daywalt and Brian Dolney from American Legacy Fishing.
Andrew, Adam with ALF. Dude, congratulations on 5 years. It's been awesome. Really glad that we could be involved and get to work together. It's been a lot of fun. I hope you can get out and celebrate a little bit this weekend, maybe get balls deep in a creek and chase some little brown fish around. Fall fishing tip for you: find the bait. That's your starting point. Find whatever the fish are eating on, and a lot of times that's just as easy as being observant. Go sit, observe what's going on. When fish break or they show themselves, go figure out what they're eating. Start there. Good luck. Thanks, man.
Hey, Tackle Talk fans, Brian with American Legacy Fishing Company here. Just wanted to take a minute, wish Andrew a very big congratulations on 5 years of the Tackle Talk podcast. It's been quite the journey. It's been a pleasure to work with you. And guys, I wish I could properly explain to you how much time, dedication, effort, consistency is required to put this podcast out each and every week. We got a little behind the scenes peek when we did our episode, and Andrew puts in a ton of work to make this thing happen. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate it, how much we value the partnership, and what a great freaking guy this dude is. It's just incredible that he kicks this thing out each and every week with his crazy busy schedule. It's impressive as all get out, and I tell you what, I'm jealous of hell of his dedication to it. So big congratulations. Can't thank you enough for your help, your partnership. It's been awesome to listen to each and every week. As far as a fall fishing tip goes, I'll tell you what, a lot of people this time of year, they get to these lakes, they follow these small balls of bait to the back of a creek. There's a bunch of fish back there and you can have a lot of fun. But as far as catching the big ones, let's go out to the main river channel, find some of those high spots, some of those little creek channels coming off the main river channel, and let's go out there and find those big shad and those big fish. And guess what, boys? It's October. Them fish ain't looking down. They're looking up. Put a topwater bait on, walk that thing across their face, and let's have some fun. Let's get it.
So there you go. Thanks, guys. 4 great words, I think, to end today's show with. Let's have some fun. I couldn't agree more there. Today, you've heard fall fishing tips from a ton of our past guests here on Tackle Talk. Over the last 5 years, we have been blessed to talk to some of the coolest darn people in the entire fishing industry, and I can't thank them all enough for popping on here to give us their fall tips. Today, you got to hear fall fishing tips from Bill Dance, Jimmy Houston, Jacob Wheeler, Mike Iaconelli, DeFoe, Boyd Duckett, Dave Mercer, Denny Brauer, Ned Kehde, Matt Becker, Alton Jones Jr., Drew Gill, Christine Fisher, Gussie, and so many more, all in one episode. And I can't think of a better way to celebrate our 5-year anniversary, hearing from all of our friends and learning something along the way. And that's all I want to do with this show in general, is to provide you with a professional, sincere, educational, entertaining fishing podcast every single week. And so far, we've been lucky enough to do it for 5 whole years. So as we close out the show today, once again, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everybody that stopped by today. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for following along. Thank you for being the best listener base that any show could ever ask for. It has been a fun 5 years, but we're just getting started. And with that, we thank you guys for stopping by today. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon. Find us on the web, tackletalkpodcast.com. Shoot us an email, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for watching. For more, please subscribe to the Tackle Talk podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts.